I was seeking for this balance of those kind of two worlds where there was this sense of spirituality, abundance, meaning, but met with a lot of really practical, frankly, divine masculine energy of like, let's do this, let's move this forward, like let's create a really tangible plan because it's urgent. We're in a time of action. You barely need to open the news to know that our brothers and sisters need love, support, and care right now, and that there's a lot of action to be made to take care of one another and, yeah, weather the storm as a community rather than disintegrating as a community.
Welcome, Dalton. It is exciting to have you here. It is a gift for sure. So good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to sit down and talk to you both this morning. In most of the practices I do, I always love starting with some sort of breath or movement or way to drop into coherence together. And today I'm excited to share one of my favorite practices. It's called the equalizer breath. Matti and I actually practiced this together yesterday. And it's a breath that follows a 4-7-8 pattern. And I'm going to guide us through it. But really the intention here is just to slow down the nervous system a little bit so that we can be closer to homeostasis, we can connect more easily. So, and I would love for everybody at home to follow along with us. I'd like us to just find a nice and straight spine, adjusting in your seat, feeling your feet on the ground, unfurling the fingers and the toes. Oh, and just take a moment to notice what it's like to be you in this body, in this moment, in this day. Is there any tightness in the chest, neck, or shoulders? Without trying to change it, just noticing. And we're going to begin with a nice and deep inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Holding for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And exhaling sweetly for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Deep inhale through the nose for 4. Hold for 7, 3, 2, 1. Now really slowly exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 2, 1. With a smile on your face, deep breath in for 4. Holding for 7. Feeling the fullness of the breath. Now luxurious exhale for 8. Breathing in for 4, allowing the body to soften. Holding for 7, feeling the present moment. And exhaling for 8, recognizing that this is a wonderful moment. All right, now we're going to take the biggest breath you've taken so far today, all the way in and all the way up, holding at the top, feeling the fullness of the lungs, maybe taking a few more sips, really pressing the lungs to their capacity. Now on this hold, feeling the energy moving through the body. Soften the shoulders, soften the stomach. Notice that you can be at this state of peak, full, charged energy, but also be soft and present. And now with an audible sigh, we're going to let go of any last little bits of tension. And just noticing if there's been any shifts in the body. I often invite my clients that if there hasn't been a shift with this style of breath, then it just means you should probably go on a walk or spend a little bit more time with yourself today to make sure your nervous system feels safe, resourced, and connected. And as you feel ready to do so, opening the eyes, and we can go in from here.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, that was a treat yesterday when we did that together, coming off of a week of chilling on the beach in the Bahamas, back into the energy of the real world. I needed that. So that is it's a great practice. And it's always good to remember to breathe, relax, smile. Appreciate that, man. Thank you for starting us off with that's a beautiful practice. Both Travis and I have spent a lot of time with you, especially over the last couple of weeks. So it's great to let others in on some of the amazing work that we've been doing in conversations. And Dalton, we've known each other now for a couple of years. First time we hung out was in Brevard, up in the mountains, and was that spring of 23. So almost coming up on 3 years now, and that's also when you met Travis for the first time. So we've been around the sun a couple of times, but love it. I guess just to start, maybe why don't you share with everyone a little bit about your story? You've got a fascinating one, college lax player, and then to where you are now. And so wherever you want to start, kind of fill people in to kind of catch us up to some of the work you're doing today.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you for the question. I always love this because I feel like I introduce myself different every single time, and it gives me some insights into who I see myself as that day. So yeah, today I think I'm going to start near the beginning. So I grew up in Ontario, Canada. So I was raised in an environment where I was incredibly lucky, but I wasn't particularly happy. We had a lot of stress in my household. Both my parents struggled with alcoholism. And it led to me having a really, really intense drive to be that good boy. And I like to joke sometimes that I won the good boy Olympics because as a straight passing white male, to end up playing Harvard lacrosse is pretty much as directly to the mark as I could have gotten. But the great challenge with that, with anything you're kind of doing for people outside of yourself, was the sick joke that I actually didn't like lacrosse that much. There was a lot of aspects of it that I did adore, like being in community, competing. There's an endless wisdom that I received from playing team sports, and I'd want the same for my kids. But at the end of the day, I was doing it as a kind of maladaptive way to receive attention, appreciation, and love. So I find myself in college, and I really didn't know what I was there for. And I was lucky though. And this is kind of a confusing statement to make because my grandmother died and my parents divorced the year out before I went to college. And the reason I say I was lucky is because that was this complete crashing and breaking down of everything I had believed as a kid. Those two experiences led me to kind of have this early rock bottom almost, where I felt this massive void of purpose, of meaning. Originally, I was going to go to college and become a businessman. I was just going to keep checking off the boxes and follow the path as directly as I could. But in those heartbreaks right before going to college, I found myself in this deep inquiry, and I arrived on Harvard's campus. And while the reasons I ended up committing to go there were for the wrong reasons, I do have to say I'm so grateful to have gone there. What an amazing school. And I arrived freshman year with this blank slate of I had no idea who I wanted to be. So I just opened up the course catalog and flipped page by page, and that's close to 400 course options. So it allowed me to really explore who I wanted to be. And one of the biggest questions I had on my heart is, what does it mean to be human? How do we pick our morals and values and direction? And I was raised without any religion. So kind of in some of these challenges in my life, I found myself wondering, it's where's a system? What lens can I put this through to make some sort of sense? So when I started my classes, I was studying art, philosophy, psychology, and psychedelics. And those were just like the classes that excited me most and the things that made me the most intrigued. And I also took a lot of courses on Buddhism. And sure enough, as the universe works, given that I didn't want to play lacrosse, my body eventually made a big interruption for me. I have a friend that says we don't get knocked off track, we get knocked on track. And this was one of those great moments. I had a huge leg injury. And at the same time, my inner experience was I was like starting as a freshman and was quite talented at lacrosse, but felt so much guilt because I didn't want to play. Like I was dreading practice. I didn't like playing the games. So I felt like I was like taking this spot that wasn't really mine. But the universe stepped in because I knew I wouldn't have stepped away myself. So I had a career ending injury and my hamstring tore almost all the way across and then never healed. And I like blamed my body so profusely at the time. But looking back, I realized it was this kind of higher energy, this higher power saying like, no, like this isn't what you want to do. So we're going to make a more drastic change for you. And from there, it gave me all of this time and space. I was no longer a college lacrosse player by halfway through my sophomore year. And I had to discover who I was all over again. And like a lot of people, like I looked to travel and I looked to exploration and I ended up going to Tibet. And at the time I was studying Himalayan art history and Tibetan Buddhism. And sure enough, I head over to Tibet and I share this because this was the start of my spiritual journey without question. And it was this short moment, which was we were at the Potala Palace. We got to spend a moment with a High Lama and receive a blessing. And I remember walking into that room and like, it was just a brief interaction, but the sense of compassion I felt from this man was so unbelievably overwhelming to the point that, and like I learned years later that there is a lot of practices of very brief transference of consciousness states from higher Tibetan teachers to students. And in that moment where he touched my shoulders, I felt this, the first time in my life, this unbelievable wave of the divine. So much so that I walked out of the room, collapsed to my knees and just wept and wept and wept and wept. And then humorously, when I looked up, I saw this was just a war zone. Like this patio was just people on their hands and knees bawling. Like 20 or 30 people barely made it out of the store, but were doing exactly what I had done. And since that moment, I changed my ideals. I was no longer looking up to the businessman or the athlete. While those archetypes can be really beautiful people and do incredible things in the world, I had this new like direction. I realized that people could have such unconditional love that you could feel it across a room. And that is like the biggest catalyst at the start of my journey. Like any other path, I took the wobbly path. I ended up in web and app development. I was a marketer. I was dancing with my ego for years in a lot of different ways, but gradually finding my way towards a really intense spiritual practice that included psychedelics, meditation, inner work, and a lot of just philosophy study. And after leaving kind of like the big business space, I did get the privilege of spending 2.5, 3 years as a meditation teacher and a psychedelic facilitator. And that gave me a chance to get really deep into that aspect of my own life. And now at this point, I, like most of these paths go, like all the dots are making a lot more sense looking backwards. And the different chapters of my life have woven together. And I'm starting to feel a lot of Dharma in my life. And I just want to define that really quick because it's a coded word. So the definition of Dharma I love is to uphold. And it's one of the old Sanskrit definitions of Dharma. And why I love it is that like I've been taught a lot about purpose on the journey. Like I even worked as the creative director of this like billionaires purpose community that we can talk about if we want. But in that space, purpose was a constant topic, but I felt that there was a lack of action. Like there's one thing to discover your purpose, but it's a whole other journey to uphold it. And then on the spiritual side, my belief is that like, and I've experienced this firsthand, so this is like empirical for my heart, is that when you uphold your divine purpose, the universe upholds you in return and you experience abundance with ease. It's no longer this kind of like trying and pushing and friction-filled path, but the universe rewards you by just utter magic erupting in your life and the ability to do things like, I remember the first time I sat for a really long psychedelic ceremony where I was just with one other person for 7 hours. I was just sitting in meditation and in support of this dear brother of mine for 7 hours. No bathroom breaks, no moving. Like, it was a very intense ceremony. But I kept being hit with this like bizarre realization that I wasn't running out of energy. Like, there's all these stories in my head. It's like, oh, at some point I'm going to start feeling tired or my body's going to hurt too much. And nope. It was so easeful for me to just look at the face of my brother and be there for 7 hours. And that was one of the first big clues that there's something so much deeper to energy than just a battery limit each day.
I thought it was an excellent delivery with a lot of clarity. And I really feel deeply that this is what the matrix wisdom is all about, is sharing, sharing this. And what I love about how you share the words that you choose, they feel really intentional. Even when you dropped us in, what hit really deeply for me was as you guided us through, you said on the out breath to feel it in a luxurious way. And that it was like you gave the consciousness a quality. And you guided my attention to energize that quality even within my own experience. And that was really powerful. And so the question I have for you is, you talked about Dharma. So that beautiful life journey path leading to this dharmic exploration, and that Dharma in one way could be defined as to uphold. So what is the difference in that discovery of purpose and what it requires to then uphold?
I think it's an unbelievably complex path. And one of the things I would point to is the traditions of Jungian psychology, internal family systems, any sort of parts work. And for those at home who might not be familiar with that, there are philosophies and systems of understanding the consciousness where we choose to view our consciousness as a collection of a bunch of different parts. And like the most common reference to this is the inner child. But in parts work, you get really nuanced in understanding that like with each trauma, with each challenge in your life, you might just develop like the actual what's happening as maladaptive coping mechanisms. But by viewing them as personalities within, it's really nuanced in how you can work directly with them. And those parts of your consciousness live at the age that the trauma happened. And just to be clear right off the bat, we're never trying to kill the parts. The parts are some of the most loving things we have in our bodies. And that's a common misunderstanding to think like, I need to go eradicate the wounded child inside of me.
Yeah. Kill the inner child.
Yeah. Literally. Like,
suffocate him.
When you say it like that, it seems so ridiculous and clear. Right. So why I bring that up is because so often on this journey, there's so much depth I could go into this on, but I'll keep it more on the high level so that we can go deeper. But you have all of these parts inside of you, and often only one or two understand your purpose. Like the most mature, developed parts of you. And the biggest delusion we can make, and I've seen this, and this is like, we can go down this road, but I've seen so many examples of this delusion in action, is to think if I understand it mentally, then I've integrated it into my body. But that is a super long journey. Like the journey from realization to actualization is years at the minimum in most cases. So when we have a purpose statement, if that only makes sense and inspires and activates a few parts of us, the rest of the parts, especially the younger parts, are actually sabotaging that purpose from coming to fruition. Because, and this is a concept that we talk a lot about with like personality and ego, is that it developed to protect us in the most loving way. Like these parts and tools, whether they dropped us into dissociation when a parent was being abusive or had some other mechanism to protect us. The thing is, at a certain point, that protection mechanism stops being helpful because we grow past the age of 8, we develop skills and tools to navigate life, and all of a sudden something like dissociation is actually a really unhealthy thing for us when we want to live a fully embodied and conscious life. So to uphold fully is to actually do the inner work to enroll every cell in your body to your purpose. And this is something I say with a lot of humility because I actually don't think this is achievable in a 100% sense. It's like enlightenment. We can have moments of enlightenment, but I do not believe that there is such thing as like, I made it to the mountaintop and now I'm here forever. I'd go even further and say there is no mountaintop. Like if you think there's a mountaintop, then there is a part of you tricking you into some form of spiritual ego. And to fully embody and uphold our purpose is something that hopefully we can do for a few moments in a full embodied state, but it's more of a constant practice. Like, can I enroll more of my being into this? And then the other side of it is that purpose and Dharma and all of these things are like a Russian doll. We are constantly unfolding layers after layers after layers. And if you think if you don't know your purpose, you should go seeking. If you think you've discovered your purpose, you should still go seeking deeper because there's always going to be another layer to unfold.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Going back just a bit on your stories, I'd love to just talk a little bit about that experience in Tibet. So you get to Harvard, you're open and interested in spirituality. Amazing that you could take a class on psychedelics in college, which obviously Harvard has an interesting and very fascinating history in that world. But you also, lacrosse is quite a violent sport. Yeah, I mean it's wild. I mean I have 2 daughters who play girls lacrosse, which is not as much like football, but it's quite interesting to be playing in that sport. But obviously you felt disconnected, though clearly amazing talent in that sport to get you to that level, and then this opening up to Eastern wisdom to spirituality. Was the trip to Tibet, was that part of your college experience? Was that something you did separately, or was it like a study abroad type of experience? Of how long were you there for?
Yeah, so I'd love to tell you that because it was a fascinating little pathway that ended up with me in Tibet. First was I had this intuition that I was interested in Buddhism. Like I knew I wanted to explore all the religions. There was this sense that Buddhism was the path for me. So freshman fall, I took an introductory to Buddhism class. And interestingly, which is something we can dive into the deeper as well as another possible tangent, was I attended a class where Buddhism was taught heavily through a Western lens. And I actually didn't like it at all. I had a lot of angst in me, and it wasn't until a few years ago that I could even say the word prayer or religion without some sort of like conditioned bias against it coming from an atheist household. So I go to this Buddhist class and it was taught in a very Western way, kind of almost as if the Buddha was a creator god, which I've found my peace with the creator god religions as well. But at that time it was a huge turnoff. But I gave it one more shot. So I took this graduate Himalayan art history course. And one of the magic things about Harvard is if you go to a niche class, without fail, the professor is like the best person in the world at that topic. So I walk into this classroom of 15 people and they're all grad students. And this teacher was just like, this woman was so passionate. You could feel it from like 30 feet away. Like every word just oozed the divine and how she related to this art. And on top of that, she lived the practice. Like I went in and I said, I can't, like, I want to take this class so bad, but like, I've never done study on this. And this is like a room full of grad students. And she looked me in the eyes and said, I will grade you off your knowledge, not theirs. And I will grade you off your enthusiasm and passion for this class.
Sure.
And she gave me the gift of letting me be a part of the class if I showed up full-heartedly. And that was like a compassion and a kindness that was actually life-changing for me, because there's plenty of spaces at Harvard where it's like the hyper-exclusive, like you need to already know these things, like a lot of that culture. But when you meet the people who are truly enthusiastic, this is one truth I learned, the truly enthusiastic people often carry compassion with them because they're existing in this state of love of what they're doing. It was the professors who were doing it for like status or money that then could shift into the like elitism, but the ones who were passionate, and it's like, I love the passionate people. So I take this class and I'm so profoundly moved by what I studied. Like even as a tiny anecdote, it's like in Himalayan art history, they never signed a single painting ever. That just wasn't a thing. Because the artists were creating something in service of God, of the divine. Like these like tankas that they were painting were meant to be meditated into. And the thought of putting your own name and taking credit for something that had flowed through you was just not even a consideration in their culture. And there was all these just like tiny things that was like, okay, there's something different happening there. And then right at the end of the semester, after writing this huge paper, I'm walking down the hallway and there's a piece of paper on the wall that says study abroad in Tibet. Within 6 days, I had signed up. It was like one of those moments where I was like, and it was a professor from Vermont who somehow his flyer had ended up on the Harvard Hall bulletin board. And I would later find out it's because this guy, like this tiny New Jersey bearded gray, like the most New Jersey guy you could ever see, had taken 3,000 students to Tibet, Nepal, Thailand, and Bhutan, and is one of the most impactful Dharmic people I will ever meet in my entire life. This guy, Jim Hagen, he's just amazing. But he has like this army of devoted students who will make sure his flyers get up everywhere because he's changed so many lives by doing these trips. And so like when we get to Tibet, I was going just for because as you may know, it's like this was 2017. Very few people have even been in Tibet since 2017 because of how dangerous and challenging the Chinese occupation is there. So he had all the connections just to get us in, had been doing it for 30 years at that point. Not only that, but this old New Jersey guy, like the most New Jersey Joe looking guy, was close friends with like all of the high lamas at every single monastery we went through. Like these venerated monks would come running to hug this guy. And for that reason, that's how we got that opportunity to receive the blessing from the High Lama at the Potala Palace. And also talk about like a heartbreaking place to be in. It's this gorgeous palace that the Dalai Lama hasn't stepped foot in for over 60 years because, as you may know, in late 50s, China went through and destroyed most of Tibet, tried to destroy all of the culture. It was called the Cultural Revolution. But this palace survived. And even as I was going up for this blessing, you'd look to your left and there was the staircase to the Dalai Lama's private space, and it was completely grown over. No, not a single soul had stepped on those stairs in 60 years. And then going into this space, the best way to describe it was my first like truly psychedelic experience. Like truly like such an elevated state of consciousness that reality. So this took me years to come to grips with. Because this man, he puts the scarf around my neck. His hands touch my shoulders for a moment. And what I experienced was him saying, I've seen you before. I see you now, and I'll see you again. But all of those sentences were layered on top of each other. So he only spoke one sentence. But in my experience, it's hard to describe in this state, but like I heard 3 sentences perfectly clear. And for like 2 years following that, until I did more study on like the consciousness transference that they do in the Tibetan traditions, I would just gaslit myself, like talking about all those parts inside of me. There were so many voices in my heart that was like, you just remembered wrong, or like that couldn't have happened. Like you're like embellishing, but like every single time I'd return to it, I'd be like, yeah, no, like something happened there that was undescribable and shook. It was like Darwin's earthquake. Like it was like I felt the earth move beneath what I thought was a completely stable material reality. And it just opened the door wide open for like, okay, so there's like this massive can of worms to open that I had not realized was an option.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, probably hard to go back to Harvard after that and be like, oh, I'm going to become an investment banker or consultant or a lawyer, right? Which
literally like,
yeah.
And but it was so perfect because, and you'd even brought up like the psychedelics, like you could create whatever study you wanted in that school. It just took the right passion and the right support. And one of my gifts is that I'm a deeply enthusiastic person, and I found professors who believed in what I wanted to study. And like some of the things I got to study and do during those 4 years, it was a massive acceleration. And the other thing, though, that I'd really highlight, because it's very true to me, is it was also a hyper diverse environment that celebrates debate. And this to me be like, even though I'll say like the teachers were to some, like I would go back and take classes there for the rest of my life if I could, because they're just that juicy and exciting and interesting. And like the teachers are that great. But it was the people that changed me. I came from like an entirely white upper class Ontario town. And I end up in this place and I end up joining a community of like, there's a majority minority. So we don't have fraternities. We have finals clubs. Harvard loves changing the words to be a little bit more pretentious. But in my finals club, it was all men, but it was this group that was like literally almost every country was represented within this group, almost every sexual identity, every personal identity. And that to me was my real spiritual awakening in that space, because I got to experience what Martin Luther King called beloved community, where there is an actual like rainbow of representation in a space and a culture where people really stand up for one another and debate. So it's like, while I was there would be instances where like somebody at one point noted that I was expressing some racial bias. And that can be a really heavy topic. Like, who likes being called racist? Like, I'll just assume nobody is putting their hands up. But the truth was, my behavior was racially biased. And I was in a space where I was like recruiting the next generation for this club. And I knew every detail about every like white freshman who looked like me, but I couldn't say the names of any of the diverse kids. And I had this moment of panic, as anybody does the first time they're called and like racist, homophobic, or like whatever these terms are. But then I got met by a dear brother that is one of the most important people in my developmental life, who was an expert in these topics. It's what he was studying. He's Latinx himself. And he took me to a dining hall and said, let's talk for as long as you need to talk. And we sat down for 3 hours and talked about everything. And I got to ask every single question. And he sat there lovingly until I could see so clearly that, one, my behavior was racially biased and therefore racist in that moment. 2, that does not make me a bad person. 3, it invites me into the most epic growth and transformation. And like that to me was when I learned that these like moments of challenge and insecurity can be these portals to epic transformation if love is present. Because I could see the other story unfolding where that arises. I have the angry reaction and it's met with anger, or it's met with something like not loving. And then I go on with this victimhood in me of being like, these people did me wrong and I'm anti like these phrases, and put the walls up against self-exploration. Whereas when you're in a space where people truly love so expansively and have so much friendship for everyone, it is so fun to like transform these challenges and blocks into something really magical that you could be so proud of moving forward in your life.
Woo! Yeah. We could just pause now and just integrate this conversation for the next couple days. Yeah, man, you have quite a potent delivery, Dalton.
Oh, thanks, brother.
Yeah. Moments of epic transformation met with love. I wrote that one down. When you talk about what you studied and discovered in kind of this transference of consciousness, what is that? You know, like what happens in that moment, and what are in that particular wisdom tradition, what have they developed or cultivated that is, you know, opening the door for them to create such an impact in that moment?
You can read about this in one book I'd highly recommend for any spiritual seekers, The Life of Milarepa. He's one of the most famous Tibetan monks, and there's a ancient and stunning life story of his that includes a moment of this transference with a teacher. And essentially what's occurring, I'd actually say it's not altogether different from a very, very well facilitated psychedelic experience, because the belief behind it is that if you show people what's possible, it creates a wonderful amount of motivation to then walk the path. So I think of the metaphor of climbing a mountain. This moment of like jumping into a different expanded state of consciousness would be like if we were climbing Mount Everest and in an instant we teleported to the top. It would be stunning. It would be really cool. Like you'd get to look, you get to be on the highest point on earth, and it would be deeply inspiring. However, the great pitfall of it is that you didn't get there yourself. And this is often what intense psychedelic experiences show as well, too. They take you from one state of consciousness to like 100 years down the road of what's possible if you practice things like meditation every day. And in that moment, it gives you the inspiration so that when you teleport back, there's unbelievable drive and motivation to then climb the mountain. And that's the philosophy in this tradition, and how it's possible. This is the part that gets like really complex, is the person who's transferring the consciousness needs to be at such an unbelievably realized and stabilized level of, and again, I don't want to say enlightenment because that makes it sound like there's some destination that we're going towards. No, these are people who you could imagine like their nervous system is so unbelievably stable, like their equilibrium. Like I love the example of Gandhi's death to think about like the highest levels of spiritual equilibrium. If you don't know the story, out of nowhere, somebody pulled a gun and shot Gandhi. And in that moment, the people were in disbelief as they watched Gandhi smile peacefully, say his God's name, and then die. Like he just smiled, said Ram, and passed away. There wasn't even in that moment of unbelievable surprise and like, boom, your path is over. He was so prepared from a lifetime of practice that he accepted and loved that person in that moment. And that would be like, for me, that is impossible to imagine. Like I would be panicking, of course. So with most people, like, because talk about scary. But when you have that level of stability, you can really share that with other people. And one more kind of grounded example, because for us to try to imagine, it's like the human mind, like they say in Buddhism, the human mind can't conceive of Buddha mind, or like the human mind can't conceive of Christ nature. So it's like, as long as we're stuck in our personality and our individual attachments, we really won't experience those states or that level of expansion. So let's take it a step down closer to what we're experiencing in this moment. And this is something I learned in psychedelic facilitation and breathwork facilitation. So through the tradition of the Stan Groff holotropic breathwork, you do these really intense, like 4-hour breathwork sessions where you have a partner, and you literally are sitting with your partner doing, and your partner is doing upregulated breath work for 4 hours straight. And the next day you switch and do the opposite. But what this teaches so in depth is that as a sitter, you actually receive some really profound insights, because they're in such an energetically sensitive state that your job is to love them without stop or distraction for 4 hours. All you're supposed to do is sit there, look at them, love them and return to them over and over and over and over again, because it has been scientifically proven that by having that sitter who's that present, you go way deeper. Like, you are able to experience profoundly deeper states of consciousness. But even as a sitter, you can feel it, because when your mind wanders, it's like a baby. Like, the person will start to get uncomfortable. And you might even notice them start, like, if your mind starts wandering, the person breathing might start reflecting. And for the fathers out there, like, it's like when you get distracted from the baby and the baby starts noticing, like, there is this like direct connection between us that when we're really expanded, we're able to notice. And that's kind of similar to the consciousness transference, is that you're doing a level of co-regulation with a like grand master. And their consciousness is so expansive that even the slightest touch of what they're experiencing pulls you into this great state.
Yeah, that's great. So let's bring it to today and the Dalton of the here and now. And, you know, you've done a ton of work, you've had experiences, and how have you seen kind of your purpose in kind of in where you're at in your life right now really crystallize, and what has that then called you into kind of as a vocation, which, and as we'll get into, Travis and I have been able to be directly part of over the last couple of weeks, which is an exciting process. And to see you at work, which I think people are getting a glimpse of Dalton's work now, which is amazing. But so talk a bit about purpose and how you see that today, and how it's manifesting in the world and with the people you're interacting with.
Absolutely. So my purpose, as I understand it today, like the layer of the Russian doll I've gotten to, is that I'm here to amplify compassionate leaders. And how I found my way to that purpose was really a feeling path of exploring different expressions of serving compassion. And for me, it's really important to also ground this in vision. Like, why, like, if you have a vision, like if you have a purpose, then you should have a vision, just to put it out there. Like, if you have a purpose and it's not leading towards some grand epic future that you believe is possible, then I would argue that you're not fully leaning into your purpose, because your purpose may be a bit rudderless. Like, it might be beautiful, but where are you going and why? And this is part of like the abundance mindset of like, we often find ourselves trapped in this very second, this very minute. But being able to expand and see possibility decades into the future, even beyond our lifetime, like the great wisdom teachers worked on projects that were well beyond their lifetime. They knew that they'd be long dead before any sort of fruit would arise from that plant. So for me, my vision is a utopian society. And this is something that my heart has yearned for since I was young. Like, I can see in my heart a world where women and children are absolutely safe, period. And we are able to be in nature and in community and spend our evenings around the campfire and do the things that us humans yearn to do without all of the layers of ego and abstraction and conflict and confusion, and just be together. I don't think this will happen in my lifetime, to be honest. But
well, there are your vision is a reality in places, right? Like, I mean, just to really, I see that, and I see it in my backyard sometimes. I see it here in our community. And so I do believe that although in some places it is challenging, that there are communities and circumstances that are not there, but I do think that your ability to hold that vision is really truly making it possible, along with the collective that is also sharing that with you, to be around that fire together. Yeah,
I love that. And that's exactly where I fell in love with the retreat space. Like, I think that I've been to many retreats that have embodied that utopian society and let me feel into what that goodness and freedom can feel like. And it is just so incredible. And for me, like, I see that amplifying compassionate leaders. I see leaders as the ones who set the standard for our communities, for our societies, for our businesses. And my gifts are in their highest level of Dharma when I'm sitting down. And this is where I've gotten to work with both of you, is like sitting down with leaders I truly admire. And here's actually a small aside that I'll put into this that I feel is so important. I had to make the big courageous leap from moving away from things to moving towards things. Because after I experienced, and like, the one negatives I will say about Harvard is that there's a massive scarcity culture. People brag. Like, I literally remember hearing people being like, well, I slept 2 hours last night. Well, I slept 1 hour last night. And like taking pride in these like really scarce energies. And that was really burdensome on the heart. Like, I found it to be quite a stressful environment. Like, I loved my classes. I found the like energy there to be very tight. Like, I actually ended up going to do a service trip in Africa in the middle of my college experience. And I was so confused because there was more abundance mentality in the largest slum outside of Nairobi called Kibera than there was on the Harvard campus. And that made no sense to me. It's like we had everything. We had our mahogany dining halls and like all these ridiculous luxuries. And yet everybody was stressed and unhappy and tense in their bodies and afraid. And yet the place that was the scariest place I'd ever been to in my entire life, I found people playing and laughing and light and loving. And again, not to glamorize slums, just to say that, because it is not like, it's easy to say, oh, life would be easier in a slum. No, it wouldn't. It would be terrible. Like, it would be truly terrible. But that doesn't mean they can't hold these beautiful cultures. So on this journey, I ended up, like, as I noted, I went from this like kind of big business world working with these like super wealthy people who had experienced a lot of scarcity. Like, working for a billionaire community was stressful because one thing that you'll find in those spaces is a lot of fear, a lot of stress, a lot of scarcity. Very few people hoard over $100 million unless there's a lot of fear in their body and a lot of challenge in their childhood. And I'm not saying to have sympathy for the billionaires. They have a lot of support and a lot of money to take care of themselves, but there is a genuine challenge of stress in those spaces. So I went from that to the far other side into the deep spiritual communities, thinking it's like, okay, I'm going to just find the abundant people. I'm going to go work in psychedelic retreats and meditation. And like, I'd been told by so many people at that point that I had a natural gift. So I got my trainings. I dove into that space and experienced some really beautiful things. Like, I got to experience my Dharma and sitting for people working through trauma and realizing that I had an endless capacity of energy for this type of work. But what I also found was that the same scarcity existed in those spaces, just in different clothes and a lot more hidden. Like, it was less overt. But under the surface, I just kept coming into the same problem over and over and over again, which was leaders who at their best spoke in abundance. But then the second stress was present, they reverted to scarcity. So these spaces subtly were being led by scarcity as well. And like, this is like the classic challenge of a high-end retreat underpaying its facilitators. And it wasn't a question of like, I needed money for that role. I would have done that role for free. But just looking at the mentality of like the belief that there isn't enough to go around and the cultures that creates. So I kind of had this like heartbreak moment, because the other thing I found too was that there was a lot of ethical lapses in those spaces under the banner of God, which was even worse to me. Like, there was rampant sexual assault in the psychedelic space. And that's heart-wrenching because people are literally trusting in the most vulnerable way. And for you, those of you at home, this is an invite actually to go to retreats, but to do your research and to make sure that you're really mindful about who you are trusting with the privilege of your soul, who you're trusting to hold you in those spaces. Because if somebody's got shadow inside themselves, they can't serve fully. Like you see this a lot in the queer community not being underserved by the psychedelic space, because unless you can find a facilitator who's fully integrated their relationship with sexuality, it won't be psychologically safe for you to journey with that person. And that's a complex thing. Like, who can say that they fully integrated their intersexual challenges? It's a very long path. So I end up in this heartbreak of like being in a new space. And then I started acting against the flow. I got mad and I said, I've seen all these unsafe spaces. I'm seeing all this, like this pain unfolding that could be prevented if we had like more ethics. And this is that moving away from energy. So I started a ketamine and meditation retreat business that I ran for about 1.5 years. But the energy underneath it was to save people from the unsafe spaces. Like there was this active, like I was a part of all these communities and I was almost like trying to make a space for them to leave the unsafe spaces and come into a space that I could hold safer for them. And I built a beautiful product, but the universe just kept saying no. And my body kept depleting. Like on this mission, I ended up getting pretty physically ill. I spent a lot of my money. I kind of depleted all my resources. And what I found was that it wasn't dharmic. Like what I was doing, that energy of like pushing against the flow and saying like, these people are bad. Like, let's move away from them. I was missing a key thing, was that along the path, I had met hundreds and hundreds of people that I loved and trusted with my full heart and intuition, that I would trust a younger sister to psychedelic journey with. And it was just a few people that I was really like mad at. Like there was a smaller number of people that were acting unsafe and there were like really beautifully devoted to the divine. And that was my invitation to reevaluate, step away from the business I was running and start moving towards the compassionate leaders. So that's where that purpose statement very much came from, is like, I realized that I didn't want to like dismantle the discompassionate leaders. I wanted to uplift and amplify the compassionate leaders and be in the flow of an energy where I was serving the goodness I saw in the world. And as a result, further fortifying my trust and love for the universe, because I'm moving towards the things I love most. So as the universe works, right around this time of like surrendering that business, kind of taking a big step back from my actions and reevaluating how I was showing up in the world, my mentor appeared out of nowhere. This was about like just over a year ago. I was at the Psychedelic Science Conference. And my dear and wonderful sister, Maya Rose, if she ever hears this, just sending her love, wonderful human. But she comes running across the conference floor. Like, I kid you not, like I'm in the conference hall. I was working an ethics booth because this is another thing about Dharma, is like, if you're passionate enough about something, people will start giving you opportunities in that space. I had ranted about ethics so many times at that point that I actually got like chosen to run an ethics discussion booth at the conference, because they knew I could just talk for like 10 hours a day about psychedelic ethics. But I'm sitting at this booth. My Rose comes running across, literally drags me across the conference hall. It's like, you got to meet this guy. You got to meet this guy. And then I get introduced to Jean-Pierre LeBlanc. One of the most catalytic moments of my life. So Jean-Pierre and his wife founded Sage Natural Wellness in Canada, I believe like 1980s, quite some time ago, which was a brand I grew up with. Any Canadian, if you ask them about Sage, will be like, oh, I love Sage. The peppermint halo is the best product ever. And it's and it's this essential oils company that built oases in malls. Like their entire kind of methodology was that they knew malls were this high stress, dysregulating place. So they created like that. There's like the most spiritual little temples inside of every mall in Canada. And like most people tell the same story where it's like you walk past Sage and you like get a whiff of the diffusers coming out and you end up wandering in and getting exposed to all of these like Vedic philosophy driven wellness products that were just so beautifully formulated that I loved as a kid. So I meet Jean-Pierre, and that's when I get introduced to success mapping and the Alchemy Network. And I would love to kind of pause there, because I imagine we're going to go deeper on what this journey of alchemy mapping is and what the Alchemy Network is. But I just wanted to stop and make sure there wasn't any questions about kind of the path to that point before I go on.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
We're talking about amplifying compassionate leaders. Well, what is, in your view, what does a compassionate leader actually look like in practice?
So a compassionate leader, first and foremost, is somebody who does the inner work. Like, to have a abundance mindset, there needs to be a lot of spiritual work done and a baseline of equilibrium. Like, we talk about these different phases, like people start in their zone of competence, then move to their zone of excellence, and then take the big leap into their zone of genius, which is that jump to Dharma. These people are already in their zone of excellence. They've already stabilized themselves. Like, they're not in this insecurity, scarcity, combative energy, constantly trying to prove. Like, a lot of male leaders can reach a lot of success, but be highly disintegrated as people. And I'm sure we've all met them, where somebody can be so emotionally mercurial in their leadership that at the end of the day, really what they're doing is trying to prove their own worth constantly and trying to reestablish their ego and their position in the world. And when you do that, all of the energy is focused inwards. It's like, how can I prove myself? How can I? Whereas a compassionate leader is somebody who has done enough inner work that they actually do have a degree of peace. Like, they're able to enjoy their life. They believe that they have an abundance. They're grateful. Like, they're already at that point in their life where they're so grateful. They love their friends. They love their family. And of course, they face all the challenges and vices and pitfalls that the rest of us humans do. But they've gotten to the point where they can really focus on the outer world and be in service to it, which often requires quite a bit of inner practice and nervous system upkeep. But what compassionate leaders do, more than anything else, is they create kind and brave spaces. So there's been this kind of language of safe spaces for quite some time now. It's actually one of my least favorite terms. And the reason being is no space is safe. Just putting that out there. It's an illusion if we think anything's absolutely safe, and it almost calls us into a delusional state of everything's fine. What we've transitioned to, and there's been some amazing, this was actually established by indigenous leaders. I can't think of her name right now, but it switched the term from safe space to brave space. And that,
I love that.
Immediately it resonates so much deeper because that's what I experienced in college. That was the profound teaching of that, was that I didn't have a room of people saying, "Oh no, Dalton, you're not racist." "Oh no, it's fine. Don't worry. You're not racist. You're a good person." Instead, they said, "No, f you, man. Our friends deserve better. They deserve better. So we're going to make sure you understand why what you did unconsciously had a real impact." And that's another part of compassionate leadership, is not being obsessed with intent, but actually being obsessed with impact. Because intent is great. I do believe intent is really important, but it takes a lot of studying to understand impact. And the great Maya Angelou said, "Do the best that you can until you know better. And then once you know better, do better." And compassionate leaders read and study the identities and perspectives that they don't represent. They recognize the truth that us three sitting here, 3 straight passing white men, we could never understand discrimination on a true and direct level, but we can study it. And that is a great kindness that we have the privilege to do. And that's actually a big thing I want to point out, is the privilege of being able to study something rather than being forced to experience it. And this is one of the hills that I will die on, is I think that the dominant identities are responsible for the education of ourselves and other people in the dominant identity of what it means to be on the other side of discrimination. It is not up to the discriminated parties to communicate why. Imagine somebody walks up to you and stabs you, and then it's your responsibility to explain why stabbing people isn't a cool thing to do. As you're in pain from the violence that's just occurred. Here's a question. Would you deliver that in a kind way in that moment? if somebody just stabbed you and asked you to explain why stabbing isn't a nice thing to do? Would you patiently?
It would be exceedingly challenging.
Very difficult.
Very difficult.
It would be so difficult. Yet a lot of like the thinking paradigm we navigate in these spaces is that the person who's been harmed is responsible for explaining why the harm is bad. And compassionate leaders have the wisdom to know that that is an unfair expectation and that you're going to be interacting with, back to the Jungian psychology. Like, if you say something triggering to somebody else, you're triggering them into a younger part of themselves, and they're going to communicate imperfectly. They're going to communicate like an angry teenager. So, as a leader, you need to have the courage to meet that dysregulation, not move into the kind of like confirmation bias of stereotype, and instead take a step back and study. There are endless books, endless resources, endless teachers to cultivate our compassion, but it does need cultivating. And the biggest barrier to that is the belief that we're good people. Like, to say I'm a good person is one of the biggest energetic blocks you could ever say. And I'll tell you the truth, it doesn't matter what you think. It really doesn't. Like, creating these stories of I am this, I am that is such a crutch in this life. You just are. In each moment, and we change every second. Even every cell in our body is different within a week. So how dare we think that we could be one constant state of goodness? And one tool that I'll give here, just for anybody who wants to go down this path of compassionate leadership, is one I love that comes from The Art of Communication by Thich Nhat Hanh. For those who don't know, Thich Nhat Hanh is one of the greatest monks in history. So he was a head of Vietnamese, like, kind of monk collective, like a bunch of different monasteries. He was the head, and from a very young age, like, just absolutely flourished in that space. And then the Vietnam War broke out. And without second thought, Thich Nhat Hanh said, meditation is useless right now. Let's go down into the fields. And he trained thousands and thousands of monks to be field medics that served both sides throughout the Vietnam War. And he established something called engaged Buddhism, or Buddhism in action. And it was actually Martin Luther King who nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize a few years later. If you haven't engaged with his work, can't recommend it enough.
Amazing amount of output.
Yeah, incredible. Like, literally so many books, and they're
you'll go to like Barnes and Noble, it'll be like the whole section. Yeah.
And it's in every language, the simplest language you could ever encounter. Like, genius. So many of my cues come from him, but here's a tool from him that I love, which is we have to be cautious with compliments and insults in this life. We never want something to flatter us too much or to insult us too much, because then it creates these cycles of attachment and aversion. It's the same as like this term, like what I've been talking about of like aversion to terms like racism. But here's the tool. Super simple. When somebody gives you a compliment or insults you, respond internally or externally with, that's partly true. So if you were to give me a compliment, I could respond and say, that's partly true. I can also be an utter menace sometimes. Or on the other side of things, if you give me an insult and say, like, Dalton, you never show up on time, I could say that's partly true. And some things I'm never late for. And you notice the energetic release that happens there. Because every statement anybody has ever told us is partly true. But it's not a whole truth. And that helps stop us from getting caught in these stories of like, I'm all good or I'm all bad. It's about the decisions in each moment and understanding the impact. And the final thing I'll say, which will probably lead us into success mapping, is one of the deepest beliefs that I've developed over these years of adventures and like quests into these different spaces is that clarity guides impact. If we are not clear on our intent, and if we're not studied on what the impact could be, then we're not going to make big change in the world. Like, the amount of times I've heard in the spiritual space, my purpose is to elevate the consciousness of humanity. Great. That's a beautiful sentiment. And I do think it can be true for the spiritual heart. Like, that could be something that you put on your mirror and inspires you every day. But how do you measure it? How do you actually keep yourself accountable? And the challenge here, again, thinking of all those parts, you could have 60% of yourself bought into that vision, but that 40% is going to be a really powerful detractor to your mission. And there's a line from Jean-Paul Sartre's No Exit. I studied existential philosophy a lot in college. Great topic for another day. But it has this line I love, which is, you called yourself the hero and all the while permitted 1,000 petty lapses. Like when you have this story of like, oh, I'm elevating consciousness, yet day to day you excuse all of these tiny unconscious actions. What your net impact is actually going to be reducing the level of consciousness in the world while believing that you're in the positive. And I find this with like purpose and missions, where it's like, if your mission or your purpose is abstract, it will default to the lowest energy in the space. I actually learned this in marketing too, in my more kind of like corporate side of my professional work. If you go out into marketing without setting clear ethical standards, your ethics will erode so fast because of the pressures of marketing itself. Like, I once said to my friend who's also in the design and kind of identity space, I was like, how do we do ethical branding? And he laughed in my face and he said, there's no such thing. There's only ethics in branding. And I think that's a really important distinction on these missions. Is like, if we're going to engage with the market and try to make massive change, we need to be vulnerable and honest about the shadow nature of these spaces and how capitalism has developed and the pressures of like, right now we're seeing a massive explosion in division, which is largely driven by the way that social media makes profits. Like they make money off of our upset and division. So therefore it flourishes. So if you go out to market and want to share your mission and share your vision, but you're really abstract, you could end up engaging with the lowest energies of marketing. And you see this often with the spiritual marketing that promises enlightenment, or one that is very seductive right now, but completely inappropriate is like all of the breathwork ads that show people going through catharsis. And like these will get crazy. Like it's often some beautiful woman laying down and some man guiding her. And there's this very sexual undertone to what's occurring. And those do sell breathwork certifications, but it's very easy to see the energetics beneath what's being taught, what's being presented. It's performative spirituality. It's about the facilitator more than the participant. Like if you're going into ceremony hoping that your client goes through catharsis, you're already starting in the wrong place, because you're literally pushing them into a trauma release rather than trusting God, trusting the universe, trusting that the practices will lead us where we need to go.
So success maps, a wonderful, wonderful process, a wonderful tool. We are in the middle of almost on the completion of mine. I think Travis, yours is more or less complete.
It's nearing a certain level of completion in its incompleteness, right? Because the success map is dynamic, right? So
yes.
From what I understand, it lives on in its essential incompleteness, but at its best form in this moment. So yeah. No, it is and it's been a wonderful process. As you know, and Dalton has to walk us through it, but it's, for me at least, I had all the elements that have kind of come together in it have all been out there, right? But they've been a bit, scattered, right? And so it's a process of really bringing it into cohesion has been really amazing, and really understanding, like our lives, it's a living, breathing, thing, right? And it continues to evolve, and so it's it's not something you just kind of do once and then put it in a drawer and forget about it. Though I'm sure fascinating to forget about it and come back to it in 20 years and see see how different. I've always had a very had a journaling practice since I was early teenage years, and so it's been fun. I've kept all those journals, and so it's fun to
randomly grab one and see what I was journaling and thinking about 10 years or 15 or 20 years ago. And the fascinating part about it is, a lot of the same things are kind of constantly coming up, right? So there's certain things that are with us throughout that time, but then, and then we evolve in the work that we do, and our awareness, especially as it expands, I think really opens up a lot of amazing pathways. And I felt that very personally in the process that we went through with the success map. So maybe give us an overview of the success map, what it is and the process, and what about it just so hits home for you that you can guide someone through the process as brilliantly as you do.
Yeah, first, thank you. It's been such a pleasure to do that process with you both. But before I get into the kind of storytelling and what the success map is and where it comes from, I would love to ask each of you to share, what was the biggest shift you felt so far in the process and why? And I'd love to start there, and then I'll add context as to what exactly these maps are, why they exist, where they came from, and perhaps Travis, starting with you, brother, in your process, what made it a worthwhile experience? And was there any particular shift that really stood out to you from sitting down with me for the sessions we've done thus far?
Yeah, the biggest shift was clarity. I mean, it was an immediate impact in my everyday consciousness, is having a framework that my mind is charmed by, that I go back to and visit throughout the day, that I remember what my purpose is and that I have clarity around it. I remember what my vision is and I have clarity around it, that I have a value system, and those core values, there are a lot of them, but they're there and present, and that I know what those strengths are, and that it just, there's a certain level of conviction and faith in having that, almost like an insurance policy is what it feels like, and so, and taking the time also to be in a brave space. I'm adopting that one immediately from now and forever, in a brave space, to take the time to be compassionately guided through it was such a gift.
Thank you, brother. I love that. How about you, Matti?
I've always had a hard time thinking too much about my strengths, right? I tend to discount my strengths and focus on where, I feel like maybe I'm lacking. And so the process of really not just listing strengths, and really after this kind of, thinking through kind of the purpose and vision in that process, which, I've always enjoyed doing that type of work, very kind of high level and aspirational, but then really kind of bringing it down to surface level and really thinking about the strengths, and then having you really, kind of push a little bit, to get me out of that mindset of I discount my strengths and let's not talk about me. Let's not shine the light on that. And so in that really for me was a really important breakthrough. And especially as I really sat with, thinking about, the foundational kind of elements of the strengths and where those strengths derived from in my background, right? And acknowledging that. So that was for me, it was a great process. And then that allowed me to kind of continue through to kind of a more articulated, bigger vision that really felt very natural versus, potentially disconnected.
I love that. Thank you both so much for sharing. And now I'll kind of share a bit of the history of where these things come from, how this came to be and my interaction with them, which, to start with the interaction, the story we've kind of gotten to in my life, that this moment of meeting Jean-Pierre, the biggest thing that was immediately evident to me was this was a man who had integrated business and spirituality. He's 70 years old now, so he's a kind of an elder in this space and has been doing this path for a long time. He's been coaching for 20 years. He ran the business for 30 years before that. But the biggest thing I felt was a sense of deep devotion, like that he was so in love with his life and the divine and his family and was present and kind, but also hyper pragmatic. And this kind of like clicked something in my head that I'd been seeking for, because like in the lacrosse and Harvard world, I loved the structure. I got to like, especially growing up, like playing for Team Canada, I got to play with some of the best athletes ever. Like they were just such brilliant, kind, hardworking men who all were following systems really devoutly to cultivate their strength and their skills and trusting leadership. And there was this very kind of like regimented aspects to it. And I came from a very kind of like military approach to lacrosse in Canada. And then at Harvard, there was this very kind of like proven methodology, like let's study, let's put our heads down, let's really cultivate ourselves. But what was missing was the abundance energy within it. And then in the spirituality space, there was a lot of ungrounded abundance where there was like, it was like being a mountain goat, but spending all of your days hanging out in a beautiful pasture, like not actually climbing the mountains. There's a lot of that energy of like you didn't actually know how resilient people were because they kept themselves out of challenging environments. And for me, I was seeking for this balance of those kind of two worlds where there's this sense of spirituality, abundance, meaning, but met with a lot of really practical, frankly, divine masculine energy of like, let's do this. Let's move this forward. Like, let's create a really tangible plan because it's urgent. Like the time of the monk isn't right now. We're closer to that period that Thich Nhat Hanh was in where he took the monks down from the mountains. We're in a time of action. You barely need to open the news to know that our brothers and sisters need love, support, and care right now, and that there's a lot of action to be made to take care of one another and weather the storm as a community rather than disintegrating as a community. So Jean-Pierre developed this mapping mechanism actually as the basis of Sage, which Sage later goes on to be sold for a massive amount of money. And he gets to live now in that abundance of financial wealth that he built. But at the start of it, it was because he had fibromyalgia. He was experiencing a lot of pain, and natural remedies were the only things that were really making a shift in that. And that, which is a very dharmic calling to like tend to one's body. And then when you discover the wisdom that it can be tended to share that with the world. The other thing they did was, one, radically commit to the Enneagram. Which for those of you who aren't familiar, it's a personality development system that's been around for at least 60 years. Its origins go a lot deeper than that, but it's been kind of actively present in the world of psychology for 60 years. And then the second was this vision of success map, which we also call alchemy mapping, which is it's like a very classic, like it felt very familiar to my business soul when I first encountered it, because it's like goal setting, value setting. It's like the classic, like start with why, purpose activities as a business. However, all of the spirituality is present on the map. So you're planning your life not according to making money, which if that's one of your goals, great, it will be there on the map. But it's about reaching that state of Dharma, of like understanding your purpose so clearly that you can experience abundance with ease for as much of your life as you possibly can. And the other belief within this, because we do personal maps and organizational maps, and this started with Sage as well, is that if you have your own vision for your life and your highest good clear, that when you then work with an organization, it's more likely that the organization will work for you rather than you for it. And this might sound selfish of like, oh, we should just devote ourselves to this. But it's actually selfless to be selfish in this way. Like to focus on yourself and have your own vessel and purpose and Dharma taken care of. You're going to perform so much better in that organization for longer and for better purposes and better ends. So they understood that like every employee and it grew to like thousands and thousands of employees, needed to have that level of individual clarity before joining an organizational kind of movement. And the other side of it is that the Enneagram, like in the simplest terms, it's a system that doesn't capture the box we're in. It captures the box we're stuck in. It's 9 different personality clusters that break down into like a lot more nuance from there. But it's these tendencies that arise from a mixture of our temperament and trauma in childhood, of how we make sense of the world. And understanding your Enneagram, I think, is one of the greatest gifts of my personal life. So as I started my story, my childhood was tumultuous, just stressful home life. There was like psychological abuse and different challenges that I navigated in that space. And as a result, I developed, in a mixture of my temperament, I'm an Enneagram 9, which is the peacemaker. And don't be fooled by its name, because what it means is that I experience the least peace and have a strong undercurrent of anger. And my entire life I've been trying to force people into peace, because that's like, I think that if I could just make the outer world peaceful, maybe I'll finally experience peace myself. So hilarious that I became a meditation teacher for a period of time before knowing this, where I literally was like getting an entire room to be quiet and peaceful all at once. It was like an Enneagram 9's like perfect dream. But you'll notice I was stuck in my personality, even in those actions. So even though I got all these accolades as a meditation teacher, the universe kept bouncing me out of that space. Like it just didn't quite land. Like it never really stabilized as a career, which felt paradoxical given the celebration I was receiving from the people I was serving. But what the universe was telling me is that the Enneagram exists in this, like when you're in your central state, you're 1 Enneagram. And when you're at your best, so like, let's say you're at the most balanced nervous system, you move to a different personality type. And when you're at your most stressed, you also move to a different personality type. So you live in this journey of 3 identities. So when I'm at my best, as a 9, I shift to 3. And when I'm at my worst, I shift to 6. Why I bring that up, why it's valuable, is because it captures why this works so well in organizations and families and communities, is because if you know that about me, there's a couple of really clear clues. Like right now, I am talking excitedly and passionately, and I'm in a higher energy state. That's because I'm actually inhabiting my 3, which is the achiever, which is a heart-centered, high driving. It's actually, I'm sitting with 2 3s right now, funny enough. So it's also unsurprising that it's easier for me to be in 3 when I'm speaking with 3s. But the big clue for my life there was that I actually wasn't meant to always be the kind of like peaceful, meditative, like facilitator Dalton, but the universe actually wants me to be passionate, enthusiastic, high energy, like really kind of expressing my full genius rather than being in that more low energy state and acting from my heart rather than my gut. The other invaluable clue that this provides is that going from 9 to 6, so that's going from peacemaker into this more kind of like intellectual archetype, which is the loyalist. If I am overthinking and ruminating, it means I'm in my stress body. So at any point, if I'm like, if I had a coworker and they noticed that I was thinking through something, which is such a funny concept, but if I was like circling or spiraling on a topic, if they understand the Enneagram, they understand in that moment that I could really benefit from a hug or a slowdown or a walk, and that I'm acting from my younger part, so not to take me for my word and to help me back into a more elevated state. The amount of conflicts that can be avoided with this level of wisdom and compassion, of knowing that when people are in their stress, they're in a different personality, they're acting from these younger parts. It acts on that like within the 4 Agreements, which is a book many of us love in this space, is like take nothing personally. Because most of the time people are disintegrated when they're expressing things like hate or fear or like judgment. So that's one level of it, is like becoming masterful at the Enneagram. Like Sage as a company even like hired positions according to Enneagram and like just were radically following it for their massive growth. And then for the success maps, these have evolved out of Sage into Jean-Pierre's personal practice, which started like 20 years ago. And I am now a part of and have found so much unbelievable joy walking people through these maps that contain a section of like the inner focus, which is vision, purpose, values, strengths, and then also kind of a daily success formula of like the different energies to cultivate inside of you to make sure you can be at your best. And then the second half of it gets super tangible in a way that you often don't find in spirituality, which is it's goal setting, a lot of goal setting. It has a 10-year big, hairy, audacious goal that you set. It's got 4 different categories of goals of like professional, spiritual, personal, and wellness just for this year alone. Then it goes into the following 3 years of having a vision of like what 4 years ahead, 3 years ahead, and 2 years ahead look for you. And then finally it zeroes in on the quarter ahead. So it's this process that usually takes like 4 to 6 hours to go through with a coach. But within it, to what Matti had brought up, what I think the true magic of this process is that you get to discover where your blocks are. We all have them. Like we all have blind spots. They're called blind spots because we quite literally can't see them without the help of somebody else or some sort of tool to identify them. But as you go through this process, like it's incredible. Within the first session, you almost always discover these massive inner stories that harken all the way back to childhood. As a coach, I study the Enneagram deeply and also have 2 coaches that I work with. We do something called collective coaching, which we can talk about as well. But like within that, we're able to, one, have a high degree of empathy and compassion for the person we're sitting with and be able to teach them through the Enneagram and understand like what the kind of different tells and tendencies are. And within that, discover where those core stories are that are limiting their own success. So we have these things called upper limit challenges, which is unconsciously we set a maximum amount of like abundance, love, and success we're going to permit ourselves to experience. And we've all experienced this where it's like things are going great. Maybe we're with our partner and we've never been more in love and like work's going well. And then we start a fight out of nowhere for some stupid reason, or we're experiencing more wealth in business than we've experienced before. And then we sabotage a project or we burn up a relationship for no reason. This is upper limit behavior. And if you have upper limit awareness, you understand that like this is our blocks and our stories jumping from our subconscious and sabotaging the present moment because for some reason, those inner parts of us believe it's not safe to step into that new altitude. And I love using the altitude reference because even this map itself kind of harkens to a concept René Dumal captured really well, which is that when we go on these journeys of expansion, and my job as a like alchemy coach, as I did at the start of this session, is to ensure that our nervous systems are in coherence and that we're actually experiencing expansion as we connect. This is where my gift of enthusiasm really comes in, is that like, I'm excited. If you're excited about something, I'm excited about it. I don't know how, but it's just like a born gift that I have that like, I spent 3 hours at dinner the other night talking to somebody about salt because they were passionate about salt. And now I know so much about like the grains and the porousness and how it impacts. Like, but the thing is, it's like, I don't personally pursue salt knowledge, but I love enthusiasm. So it's like, if you're pumped about it, I'm going to be pumped about it. And in these sessions, it leads to amplifying the ability to be in an expansive consciousness as we connect. And the idea from René Dumal is that we're essentially, our heads are above the clouds. We're like at a point in the mountain where we're above the clouds. It's spacious. We can see as far as the eye can see. But inevitably, everyone, even the most enlightened beings, even Gandhi, who was mentioned at the start as being so advanced, at some point we go below the clouds. And we spend a lot of our time here, especially people who are highly driven. Here's the thing. If you want to go be a monk, go be a monk. Great. That might be your Dharma. But question if there is actions that your brothers and sisters are needing today. And that if like being a monk is an avoidance of moving into action. When we move into action, the body gets stressed. It's like lifting weights. If we want to, like, we get our form's amazing at a certain weight point, but if we want to get stronger, we need to increase the weight and our form will start deteriorating. We've like anybody who's weightlifted knows that moment when you're like bench pressing and your arms are sideways and your back's in the wrong position and you're kind of just pushing through it. That's similar to acclimating to new levels of consciousness. The harder you push in life, the more times you're going to spend dysregulated. And that's like going below the cloud line. And the challenge is, and here's the invitation, you need to trust the version of you that saw above the clouds. It's a life journey to do this. We've all done it where it's like, especially if you have a super expansive mystic experience, things can be so clear. And then a week later, you could be doubting yourself and gaslighting those insights and denying that they were true or accurate. No, you're acting from a lower vibrational state, a lower state of consciousness. You need to trust what you saw from further up. And the success map is kind of like a communication tool through those states. And I say this to every client I've ever sat down with is like, as you make this map, we're going to make it to be so expansive and calling your highest possible good. And you need to have this printed out with you pretty much every day of your life. Because when you find yourself in a scarcity mindset, you need to follow. That's why it's called a map. Like, you need to follow the map. You need to stop trusting the small energies and like, don't believe everything you think. Like, let go of those like scarcity mindsets. Like, when you wake up in the morning and you like many of us wake up and go, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough friends. That's the start of most of our days as humans. It helped us survive when we were being chased by wolves. But in this era, we need to be in abundance for our brothers and sisters. So by looking at a map, by having great practices, you can very quickly shift the negative default of the mind into abundance, into looking at the map and being like, I'm going to follow these. I'm going to be honorable and obedient to my commitments to myself, because the version of me that wrote this down, they saw clearer. Like they saw what was ahead and they know what's best. And some days it's going to be hard, but if I trust this, I'm going to reach abundance faster. And here's the biggest secret to this. We have been brainwashed into thinking abundance is selfish, into success is selfish. It can be. Like, if you are out there completely stuck in the movement of radical individualism, which, by the way, is a complete illusion because we couldn't possibly be separate. Like, there's no way to break the interdependence of our existence. We are we are dependent on the system and the people and the plants and the water and the trees, everything we are connected to. So individualism doesn't exist. It's a myth. But abundance, on the other hand, and this is something I constantly speak to Enneagram 3s about, honestly, is like, I'll sit down and we'll get to strengths and there'll be this story of, no, I'm not the type of person who like brags, or like, I don't see myself like that. Like, sorry if this feels too familiar, but within that, the thing that I always communicate that I feel so strongly about is it's not about you. Like, it's not about how you are perceiving yourself through the eyes of others. This is like, I look back at the lacrosse field and some of the wisdom that came from these really like high performing teams was, I needed to know the strengths of my teammates. We had the saying, know your personnel, on one of the best teams I've ever played on. And like, we repeated it every single day. Like, you needed to study and understand every player you're on the field with, because at the end of the day, as a team, we wanted to win. Therefore, the best way to win would be to be hyper radically honest about our skills and weaknesses as a team. Not like the best player on the team being like, oh, I'm not that good at shooting. Like, no, don't give me the ball. Like, I'm a humble guy. Like, I'm humble. So, but that's not the problem. And as humanity, what I'm getting to here is that if you play small, you are letting down the collective. This is about them, not you. Like, for you to understand your strength and step into your best expression, to be hyper clear about what you're here to do and what you're best at, that increases your ability to serve humanity massively. Like, for me to be able to go out into the world and say, this is my friend Matti, this is his purpose specifically, these are his strengths, that will make it much more likely to enroll and collaborate on that journey and to have a bigger mission. It's the same way that like you have a lot of the spiritual delusion that you can't have money and spirituality. That like you need to be the poor starving artist or like a monk, and that money in itself is bad. Money is an amplifier that is completely neutral. I'm going to say that one more time. Money is completely neutral. Yes, it does. To the point I said earlier, unconsciously, you will follow the negative energies of it. If you're not consciously relating with money, you'll probably be expressing with money in a negative way. But it's a delusion to think the money's holding that energy. It's a made up concept. Like it's not barely even paper these days. It's just a number on a computer. But if you trust yourself and have a full abundance mindset, and you're willing to accept, like, if your path is to make massive money in your life, great. I trust you. I trust you that you're going to have an amazing impact and do the work to steward that money and to share your wealth with the people around you. But the crazier level, even just for those people who are having any sort of mental friction to that statement, is that you can also just have fun with the money. I'm going to say that again too. You can have fun with the money you have. And notice how if you are constantly saying, I need to give away my money, I'm making money so I can give it away. What is the story you're telling about yourself? It's probably that you're not worthy. And if you're acting from unworthiness, you are not going to be in Dharma. If you need to believe that you are not only worthy, you are not broken, and you never have been broken. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to earn. This is all just this awesome path that God, the divine, puts ahead of us. And we get the chance to be an epic service. And in our last moment, whenever it comes, have a smile on our face and said, damn, and be like, damn, I really did all that I could in each moment I could. And I made a lot of mistakes. But once I learned from those mistakes, I was somebody who had the honor to act and actually change my behavior instead of pushing away every insight the universe was providing me.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, we could go on forever on these topics, and I think there is definitely an opportunity to go deeper on a couple of things. I think abundance and the idea of abundance and the challenge a lot of people have with abundance and with the term abundance. And then I think it gets back to yours is this sense of undeserving is a tricky one, especially in our society. So I think there's a lot of beautiful opportunity to kind of dive deeper into abundance.
Yeah, Dalton, thank you so much. That was such a informative and beautiful and powerful transmission on what success mapping is and how impactful it can be for leaders, for anyone. In those tools, I'm discovering that now as well. And I would highly encourage anyone, everyone. I'm like, everybody needs a success map, a personal success map, at least, right? I just walked my daughter Piper through it, and it was really beautiful for a father and a daughter to like sit down together and create that brave space to walk through. So thank you. Thank you, Dalton, just for everything you brought in this conversation today. I think that so many people are going to find this so valuable to listen to. And it's great to hear more of your story and learn more about you. I took a page of notes, and there will be many follow-up questions offline coming. What's one practical tool you use every day that is like the one tool you wouldn't abandon, that's the most important tool you use every day?
Yeah, I have a very, very specific one. Silence, stillness and silence. I believe one of the greatest challenges we face as humans is that our minds are constantly busy. We're constantly thinking about thinking and like stuck in the past and the future. And like, there's all of these different pathways of meditation and spiritual practice. And my personal opinion is they all lead to a simple truth, which is sitting down with yourself in silence. Like even yoga itself was designed as a practice to calm and calm the body and create the flexibility to be able to meditate. And there's many different ways you can meditate. Of course, it's like the Sufis were spinning, and some people dance, some people sit, some people stand, some people walk. What I think is invaluable is that you experience space in between thoughts. So there's many meditation practices that are entirely guided. And let's be honest, even though you are emptying the mind, you are listening and focusing and like experiencing thought through the form of listening to somebody else's voice. Even if it's just for a minute a day to begin, I really think, like, to live our best lives, we need to experience that silence beyond thought, beyond personality, of what it means to just be. And the thing that you'll find is, like, for those of you who are sitting and saying, "Oh, meditation isn't for me," that's not true. It might be harder for you, I'll be honest and empathetic there, but it is for you. Like in Tibetan Buddhism, they use the analogy of, like, for everybody ever, and this is like several thousand-year-old teaching, meditation starts like a rapid waterfall. It's pouring water, thought after thought after thought. It's usually quite uncomfortable and challenging, and like you'd come up with a million excuses during that stage to not meditate. Usually people say, "I don't have enough time," and you'll notice it's all scarcity. It's usually like, "I don't have enough time, energy, space," or like, everybody has time, energy, and space to be with themselves for 5 minutes or more. Everybody. I don't care what the story is. And then after a while, that waterfall turns into whitewater rapids. Still pretty rough, still pretty challenging. Then it turns into a fast flowing river, and then a babbling brook. But before you know it, and time goes by so fast as we know in this life, it's a still pond. And you're able to fairly easily get into this state of expansive enoughness. And why I say expansive enoughness is that we need that remembrance that the rest of everything is a bonus in this life. Everything, the pain, the wins, the celebrations, it's all a bonus. Because all it takes is for us to slow down and be silently with ourselves, to remember that we are enough and that there is nothing missing. Like, you're in this state, and this is the invitation to pose. It's like, if you're sitting in stillness, it usually takes a build up to get there. Ask yourself, is anything missing? You'll know that you're in a state of expansive enoughness when there's a resounding no, nothing is missing. Everything is whole and present in this moment. By touching into this space, they've even actually, and this is a big thing during our time, they've scientifically proven that this is the best medicine to brainwashing. Like, in all the studies, the government and marketing, all this has done on mental, like, coercion and control, the greatest medicine is returning to silence and discovering what you believe in. Because if you're in an upregulated, upset state, which is what these systems want you to be in, they want to keep you upset. They want to keep you locked in. They want to keep you ruminating on what you're missing. You're overweight. Like, right now we're in the age of massive success for GLPs. And we're surrounded by endless ads telling us that we're overweight. What a complex brainwashing. Like, that is such a challenging thing for people to face, let alone if you already have, like, trauma in the body and related to such things. So this is my call. Meditation is for everyone. It's non-negotiable. Even start with one breath a day where you're in stillness and build from there. And I need to return to this practice weekly. It's like something that takes effort and intention, but it's on my success map. And I make commitments to myself consistently around meditation.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Yeah. And it is a reminder it can just be a couple breaths. I mean, we read about it. It's like, you have to meditate 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the afternoon. And it's just like, and you're just like, oh my God, yeah. But it's okay to build up to that. And it's okay not to even get there, right? As long as you remember to do it, for even a minute, right? It's super helpful. And to breathe. Mm-hmm. Always remember to breathe.
Always.
Well, brother, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for the time. Anywhere people can find you if they're interested in exploring the success map, how would you like to offer yourself up to the audience? Anything they can follow or how they could potentially reach out?
Absolutely. So I would love to make the open invitation to reach out to me directly. So you can reach me at Dalton, DALTON, at thealchemynetwork.com. You can also go straight to our website, thealchemynetwork.com. We have a a big upgrade coming that will probably be live by the point that this podcast goes live. But either way, you'll find easy ways to reach us through that.
Yeah.
The second call to action that I would love to throw out there is that if you are passionate about a Canadian charity or have connections, like if you're a Canadian and you love a charity or you run a charity yourself in Canada, we have a leadership grant program that is incredibly generous, where for any Canadian charity who is a high impact organization and willing to take this step, we provide fully funded coaching. And this is something that we believe in deeply. It's a part of our ethos. We're fortunate that the success of Sage Natural Wellness has led to us having a foundation that's connected to our coaching business. We have a very strong belief that helping the helpers is a really honorable and beautiful thing, and that people in the nonprofit and charity spaces do not receive the same level of support that the for-profit space is. Like, you meet any executive in the for-profit space, they're probably a part of YPO. They probably have executive coaching. They have insurance covered therapy. There's so many layers of support they receive that people in the nonprofit charity spaces unfortunately do not. And there's a culture of scarcity around it too, of their salaries are low, their time is stressed, there's a lot of strain. So the further invite actually that I'd put there too is if you represent an American foundation and you want to provide these types of services to American nonprofits, we are constantly seeking American foundation partners to support our team going and coaching. The last thing that I would add that's kind of a unique detail about the alchemy, our theory of alchemy and how you work with the alchemy network, is that we do an approach called collective coaching, where you don't just have one coach, but you actually have all three of us. So our coaching staff consists of myself, Jean-Pierre, and this unbelievably powerful woman, Rachel Hayek. And together we create custom programs for every single one of our clients where they actually receive time with each of us. And we design something to serve their success that leads to, with both of you, you've done a lot of your coaching with me, but then we bring in Jean-Pierre to amplify and take it to the next level. And then very soon, which will also be guiding you both through, is doing an Enneagram workshop with Rachel. She's a world Enneagram expert, has taught workshops all around the planet, and setting people up to sit down and receive 3 full sessions entirely focused on things like the Enneagram can be really powerful.
Oh, amazing. And we'll make sure all this is in the show notes, so easy to access for folks. Dalton, thank you, brother. Sure. That was beautiful. That was a gift, and selfishly, I'm so excited I get to interact with you on quite a consistent basis, especially recently. So it is a gift, and thank you for bringing your gift and purpose and mission to so many people into the world. So incredibly grateful for you and for your friendship.
Yeah. So much love and appreciation for you both. Thank you so much for having me today. It's always so fun to have conversations like this. I feel like I got to know you both better and myself a little bit better. So thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, guys.